Today is Friday, it's December the 10th, and this is the first of two video devotionals today. Our scripture reading is Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Now, the focus of this devotional will be Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Before we go into that devotional, I encourage you, I ask you, if you like these videos, if you're listening to them, would you take a moment and be an encouragement to this writer, this pastor. It takes about 3 to 4 hours a day to study the scriptures, to write an outline, to write a devotional, and then to produce. And so I would surely appreciate knowing that you're out there and that you are being blessed by this ministry. Now, the title of this devotional is A Need to be Needed. And again, the scripture reading for this devotional is Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Now, I'm going to divide up this devotional into 3 different devotionals, but they will all be in one from Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Now, I'm titling the first 3 verses of Ecclesiastes 4, Unfair, Unfair. Solomon is an aged king now, perhaps frail and definitely near the end of his days. And he returns in this book, Ecclesiastes, to a familiar subject. He contemplates the injustices that men have suffered in life. And the king writes in Ecclesiastes 4 in verse 1, "So I returned and I considered all the oppressions that are done under the sun. Behold, the tears of such as were oppressed, and they had no comforter. And on the side of their oppressors there was power, but they had no comforter." What a sad commentary on how men oppress and victimize the innocent and the less fortunate. The king observed the oppressed have nowhere to turn for comfort. And in his state of heart and mind, Solomon concluded that an innocent man that is oppressed would be better dead than to suffer the sorrows of oppression. Now again, we have to understand spiritually where Solomon's coming from. He's not in a good place in much of this that we are reading. Now, Ecclesiastes 4 in verses 4 through 8, we'll notice that there are 4 sinful attitudes regarding wealth and possessions that are found here. The first is found in verse 4, and it is the sin of envy. You know, some people are envious of their neighbor's wealth and possessions. And while the nature of man is not to envy the labor or the work of another, but it is the desire for the fruit and success of his work. As an envious, jealous spirit, you see, is unloving. And it actually violates the command, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." So the first sinful attitude towards wealth is to be envious or jealous of another's success. Now, the second one we find in verse 5, and it is the spirit of laziness. Laziness is also a sinful attitude when it comes to prosperity. Solomon observed, "The fool foldeth his hands together, and he eateth his own flesh." Now, that is an interesting thought. Folding one's hands is an indication that the fool quits working, and he becomes dependent upon another. He is what we read in Proverbs 19, verse 15, a sluggard. Proverbs 21 and verse 25, he's slothful. The effect of one's laziness is that you cannibalize your future. And so Solomon observes they eat their own flesh and what might have been. So we have envy, laziness. The third sin towards prosperity and wealth is the workaholic. He's the polar opposite of the indolent, lazy man, for he labors to fill his hands with wealth and toils at the sacrifice of himself, his health, and sometimes at the sacrifice of his family. And Solomon observes of the workaholic, it would be better to have a little, just a handful, and enjoy peace and quietness than to have 2 hands full and have no one. Now, the fourth sinful attitude is that of the miser. The miser is observed by Solomon as the rich fool, and he toils away for his life for riches, But like the rich fool in the parable of the Lord's teachings in Luke chapter 12, he's a fool because he's never content. The miser may find himself rich in goods, but sadly alone. He has money, but he has no family or friends that he might bless them. Now, there's another principle. The third principle that we find here are principles regarding life, work, and friendship. You'll notice in verses 9 through 12 of Ecclesiastes 4, there are three thoughts. The first is this: working with others is satisfying and is far more rewarding than working alone. Solomon observes in Ecclesiastes 4 and verse 9, two working together are better than one because they have a good reward of their labor. The illustration there I could bring to you is like oxen that are yoked together and are stronger and more productive when they share the same yoke. You and I are by nature happier and more satisfied when we work with others. The king goes on and he observes in Ecclesiastes 4 and verse 10, for these two as they labor together, if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to the one who is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. Working together builds bond. It discourages selfishness, and it provides an opportunity to encourage and minister to others. Now, a third principle in this matter of working together is that working together also affords us protection and encourages perseverance. Solomon illustrates this with Ecclesiastes 4, 11 and 12. If two lie together, that is, lie together in a bed, then they have heat. Now, how can one be warm alone? And if one prevail against two, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Everyone needs to be needed. And huddling together affords us comfort and encouragement. Now, the illustration of Ephesians 4 and verse 11 is that of a husband and wife who find warmth together on a cold night. They are also made stronger. When we work with others, we laugh together, we cry together, and we work together. Now, a thought that follows is in the latter part of Ecclesiastes 4:12, and it is that working together fulfills God's plan. You see, for God never meant for us to be alone. We read in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 19, after God created Adam, the only thing that he found that wasn't good was that man was alone. And God said in Genesis 2 and verse 19, it is not good that man should be alone. You see, my friend, you are happiest when you are needed. And then let me give you the last thought from Ecclesiastes 4, and that is that one can be a fool at any age. Contrary to the opinion of some, youth does not own the market when it comes to being foolish. A child that is poor but wise is better than a king corrupted by power and unwilling to hear or heed instruction or correction. I close then with a quick review. You know, we live in a world, there will always be injustices. Things will not be fair, and you should expect it. The second is a warning about wealth and success of others. It might tempt you to be envious and lazy, and even sit idly, focusing on what others have that you do not. Don't be a miser. And then remember also, when you work together, when you labor with others, you are the happiest. You know, people are fickle and foolish, and are characterized by foolishness. You know, I have found over the years the happiest people in a church are the ones who are working. It's the ones who don't work, the ones who don't labor, that become so unhappy and disgruntled. Let's take a page out of Ecclesiastes 4, apply it to our lives, and it will transform us. God bless you. This is the first of 2 devotionals. The second will follow. It'll be based on Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Thank you for following this heart of a shepherd. God bless. Bye-bye.